Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Catherine and this is Raspberry Reads. So today I have a really exciting video. I've been tagged in like a video tag for the first time ever, which is really exciting. So a huge thank you and shout out to Jolene at Bookworm Adventure Girls. So she's a fellow Canadian booktuber who I really enjoy watching her videos. And yeah, she was kind enough to shout out several newer booktubers that have under 1,000 subscribers, including myself. And so I'm really excited to do this tag today. And the tag is called Don't You Forget About Me. This is an original tag that Jolene created. And I'll leave a link to her video below for you so you can go in and see what she has to say about this. But yeah, so this tag is only 4 questions and it's all about books that you've either forgotten, wish you've forgotten, or books that you'll never forget. So yeah, without further ado, let's just get right into it. The first tag is Clean Slates, books that you've read but don't remember anything about. And like Jolene, I'm going to give you three books for each category. And so I had a good think about this, and the first book of the Clean Slates category is Tell No One by Harlan Coben. Now I read this only last year, and Harlan Coben is a very prolific mystery writer, thriller writer, and I think there was a adaptation of one of his works that just came out on Netflix not too long ago, and I did enjoy that. Now I should say that I really enjoyed Tell No One. I gave it 4 stars. The only thing is I can't remember exactly what it was about. And I think that's the problem when you read a lot of thrillers or mysteries like I do, is they sort of start blending into one. Yeah, I vaguely remember it being about a husband and wife, and maybe the wife disappears. But yes, I mean, the whole point of this tag is that I can't remember what that book was about. So that's number 1. The second one, and I'm actually, it's quite coincidental that I was tagged to do this video because I was thinking about some future video ideas about sort of memorable books. And I initially thought, oh, I want to include The Stone Diaries by Carol Shields. And I remember that being such an important book for me. Like, I read it fairly young, and it was one of the first sort of more adult content or adult fiction books that I read. And I remember really loving it, and I remember liking sort of very specific parts of it. But when I went to go and look up the synopsis of the book, none of the bits that I remember were included in the synopsis. And then more to the point is I couldn't remember any of the book after reading the synopsis. So I think I need to read The Stone Diaries again, because I gave it either 4 or 5 stars when I did read it as a teenager, but I just can't remember what it's about. So yeah, that's the second book. And then the third book, so this is again a book that I read when I was a teenager. So as you can see behind me, I've got an Egyptian print. I loved reading Egyptian historical fiction. And the one that I gave 5 stars when I read was called Child of the Morning by Pauline Gedge. And I think I've read several of Pauline Gedge's ancient Egyptian historical fiction works. And I just don't remember what this one was about. I think it was about obviously a queen, or yeah, an Egyptian queen, possibly Hatshepsut, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. But yeah, I don't remember anything about that book. So again, perhaps that's something that I should pick up and reread at some point, because if it was that good, I have no recollection. That's not quite matching up. Moving on to the second prompt. So this is Genie's Lamp. And so Jolene describes this as books you wish you could forget. And oh, this is such a good prompt because there are so many books that I could have picked for this. But yeah, so here are 3 books that I wish I could forget, but they're just like little worms in my brain. So the first book was Confessions of Frannie Langton by Sara Collins. And the reason why this book I remember it but wish I didn't is because this was the first and only book that my partner Lucy and I decided to buddy read in like a summer book club. And this was in the summer of 2021. I'm referring to my blog post that I wrote about it. That's why I'm looking up off screen. But yes, I did finish this book. Lucy tried to read it and then tried to listen to it on audiobook, and she DNF'd it. And it's one of those books where it was quite forgettable in a way that the plot was clunky, it dragged, the writing was really confusing, and I just didn't connect with the characters at all, which was really disappointing because there was queer representation in this book, and we thought it might be a good choice because we both really like Sarah Waters. So anyways, the reason why this book, if I could have the Genie magic lamp wish and forget about it, is because I was just really disappointed that this was the first book that we had tried to read together, and it had so much promise, and it just really let me down. Yeah, I think we should probably try and read together a different book, but yeah, we didn't get off to a good start on that one. So the second one, the second book for this particular prompt is Harvest by Jim Crace. And so again, I read this in 2021, and this book made me so angry. It was also quite tedious, so it was something that I should have really enjoyed. It was set in England during the Enclosures Act, so I guess like around the 1600s, and it's told from the perspective of the protagonist, whose name is Walter Thirsk. So he's a villager, and he's the master of the village, his confidant. And the novel itself is set in a very short time period during harvest, and it's sort of about how the villagers' lives and how it's all turned upside down during harvest. So great premise. But the reason why I wish I could forget this book is the representation or lack thereof of women in the book. So again, I'm going to refer to my blog post too, so you can, I'll read out my thoughts. So I said back in 2021, my biggest disappointment with The Harvest was representation or lack thereof of women. Women are only mentioned as minor characters, and when they are included, they were over-sexualized. So there's several references to abuse, and in a few places women were likened to animals. They were portrayed as sexual objects. There was a lot of tropes where strange women are portrayed as witches. And I guess maybe what Jim Crace was trying to do was sort of write in a style of how some women were perceived at the time, but that's a huge oversimplification of the era. And it just left a really sour taste in my mouth reading this book. Yeah, so not only was it tedious, but it was just how he wrote about women was really off-putting. So for that reason, I wish I could forget Harvest. Coincidentally, another book that I read around the same time as Harvest, which I also wish I could forget, is Leave the World Behind by Rumaan. So this just came out as a film on Netflix not too long ago, which I haven't watched yet, and I probably won't. So it's not the fact that I didn't like the premise or the plot, or even some of the characters. It's a really intriguing book, quite creepy. It's kind of dystopian. You don't really know what's happening. There's a lot of really interesting sort of racial identity discourse in it. So yeah, lots of really good things in this book, and that's probably why I remember it. But the bit that I wish I could forget is, again, similar to Jim Crace's writing in Harvest. It's some of the writing that Rumaan had about the characters was very sexualized, particularly in relation to the children, the minors. And also some of his writing just came off as sort of unnecessarily pretentious, which maybe was on purpose, but I found it distracting. But yeah, I guess the main point is anytime somebody uses over-sexualized language when referring to children, I just get the massive ick, and that was a huge turnoff for me. So yeah, disappointing, because I know this book, a lot of people love it, and it is a very good book, but yeah, I wish I could forget that particular type of writing. So the next question or prompt is forgotten gems. So these are books that you think need a little bit more love. So again, like Jolene, I have 3 books to share with you. So the first one is Tinkers by Paul Harding. Yeah, this one came out around maybe 2009 or so. It won the 2010 Pulitzer. So I mean, it's really a forgotten gem, but I haven't heard a lot of people talk about it. Anyways, Tinkers is, it's about an elderly man named George Washington Crosby, and then his father, Howard. And it's basically on George's deathbed. He sort of reflects on his childhood, about the struggles that his father had as a peddler and as somebody who suffers from epilepsy. And it talks a lot about the family's like poverty and their struggles. And this was set in Maine in the early 1900s. And I mean, the thing, I just thought that this was a really beautifully written book about sort of a father-son relationship. Yeah, and I remember really just connecting with the themes of mortality and how the characters sort of reflected on their lives. And yeah, I just think it was such an interesting read. And I do think about it a lot. So for that reason, yeah, I would say it's a forgotten gem that probably deserves maybe a bit more attention today, given that it won a Pulitzer in 2010. The second book is Freak the Mighty by Rodman Philbrick. And this is a child's book, or like a middle grade or young adult, but yeah, probably more so middle grade. And I read this so long ago, so I can't really give a full synopsis, but it was basically about 2 boys, one who had maybe some learning difficulties, or, you know, it wasn't portrayed in those words, but yeah, some learning difficulties, and but who was quite big in stature, and then another boy who had some like physical disabilities and was quite small in stature, and I think impaired in his movement. And it's their relationship on how they sort of work together as this unstoppable force. And I just remember it being so emotive. I remember crying. It reminded me a lot of, in a way, like of Mice and Men, which is like that relationship. And yeah, it was such a beautiful book. I'd really like to read it again as an adult. But yes, that's definitely one that I had forgotten about, and it was a gem. And yeah, the last book in this category of forgotten gems is The 7 or 8 Deaths of Stella Fortuna by Juliet Grimes. And this was a historical fiction novel set in Italy and then in America in the early 20th century, and it follows I guess like multi-generations of a family from Italy and during the war, and then moving to America. And yeah, it was just beautiful. We read it for book club, and it was lovely writing, really complex and well-written characters, and it's a book that definitely stayed with me and is an absolute gem. And I have not heard anybody talk about this book. I think it might be Juliet Grames's only book as far as I know. But yes, if you haven't heard of it, please go and get it and read it, because it was absolutely wonderful. And the last category is Forget-Me-Nots, which is, I love Forget-Me-Not Flower, but yeah, these are books that you'll always remember, so you'll never forget them, right? And so again, I have 3. So the first of the 3 books for the Forget-Me-Not section is The Jade, Peony by Wayson Choy. So this is a fairly well-known book in Canadian literature, and I just really enjoyed it. So it was a historical fiction. It's set in Vancouver during the Second World War, and I believe it follows a Chinese family, although there's a lot of discussion of the racial tensions between Chinese and Japanese communities in Vancouver at that time. But yeah, it was a beautiful story about sort of the different family members. I remember really enjoying the character of the grandmother. I think her name was Popo. And I just remember really enjoying the narratives about sort of identity and diaspora and navigating sort of different cultural differences. And I mean, I think about it, it's a forget-me-not. And it's a forget-me-not book because I think about it quite a lot. I think firstly because it was just a very well-written book, and deserves all the praise that it has been given, and I'm sure will continue to receive. But also, I'm sure one of the reasons why I think about it a lot is because it did such a good job of characterizing or describing the neighborhoods in Vancouver. And being from Vancouver, I just think about it in kind of like a nostalgic way, even though it was obviously written in a time period well before I was born. There's still the historical elements of like Gastown, Chinatown. Those really come through, and I can see elements of that past in Vancouver today. For that reason, that's definitely a forget-me-not book. So if you haven't read The Jade Peony by Wayson Choy, I would highly recommend doing so. The second book that's a forget-me-not is Barkskins by Annie Proux. So Annie Proux is one of my favorite authors, and this was the first book I read by her. It's quite a chunky one. I can't remember how many pages it is, but it was certainly over 500. And this book is a historical fiction about early settlement in North America, so mostly what is now the United States, but also parts of Canada as well. It's multi-generational. It's actually not just set in North America. It covers different continents. So it's such a vast, sweeping narrative. But I really enjoyed the kind of early settler history, particularly with a more modern lens on treatment of Indigenous people at that time. And I just really connected with lots of the characters, although I must admit many of the characters do die because it's set across such a long time period. I wrote a very long blog post about this that I can share in the description below, but I'll just read a little excerpt for you. So I wrote that from the Cour de Bois and habitants, these are the early settlers and men involved in the fur trade, to modern day lobbyists and businessmen, there's been a continual parade of white men presuming entitlement over nature and over others. There have equally always been people who deem themselves stewards of nature, part of the natural environment. These contrasting views are what make Barkskins such a heart-wrenching read. As you can see, I really enjoyed it, and I think about it a lot. So if you haven't read Barkskins, I recommend you do. And the last book that is a forget-me-not, and it's actually one that I regret getting rid of my physical copy. I did because I didn't think I would read it again. But firstly, it had a beautiful cover. I'll make sure I put a picture up. It had a beautiful cover, and it's one that I might end up picking up again in the future. So this is Migrations by Charlotte McConaghy. And it was kind of dystopian, I suppose, or it definitely has a climate crisis, climate change theme throughout it. And it's set it's set on a boat. It's migration, so it's looking at the Arctic tern, a species of birds, and it follows one woman's journey to kind of track these birds that are dying out. So it's a kind of a combination of sort of a reflections on ecological crises and journeys of migrations of the Terns, and then her journey and processing the trauma from her past. And yeah, it was such a sad book, but it's a piece of fiction that's definitely stayed with me. If you're into sci-fi or cli-fi, so climate fiction books, then I would really recommend Charlotte McConaghy's book. Yeah, so that is my attempt at a first ever tag. And I think the point of these is to sort of pay it forward. So I'm going to tag a few booktubers that I watch. So to all those booktubers, if you're interested in doing this tag, then please do so. I look forward to hearing your answers for this. So I tag Brittany from Literarily Smitten, Tristan from L-Space-Books, Angela from Angela's Bookcase, and Daniella from Uncommon Reader. Yeah, so thank you again, Jolene, for tagging me and for creating this tag in the first place. It was really interesting, and I look forward to hearing everybody else's responses to this. If I didn't tag you and you'd like to respond, please do so. And if you don't have a booktube channel, then feel free to just write your responses in the comments section. Yeah, so thanks again for joining me, and I hope you have a wonderful day, and I'll see you soon.